Well, how you guys doing? It's been a good while since I've made a new video. I've moved into a new apartment. Um, been having to change my entire daily routine for the past couple months due to all the changes in my life. So, um, been trying to get used to all of this shit. Just having to drive everywhere instead of being able to walk to the places I used to walk to and everything. It's been getting a lot less exercise recently, so that's something I'm not really used to. Uh, but uh, what I want to talk about is the recent acquittal of Donald Trump by the Senate, more specifically by the 43 Republicans who decided to go with him despite having their own lives put at risk during the insurrection on January the 6th. Now, are people really surprised? Yeah, there's a lot of echo going on here. I got a lot of space in this apartment compared to the one I had before, so it might affect the quality of the sound. Um, but are people really surprised that these people, despite having their own lives put at risk by Donald Trump's eliminationist rhetoric, by Donald Trump cultivating his little army of pitchfork wavers, are they really surprised that these people acquitted him? Understand, a decent portion of the Republican Party in Congress today were elected during the Tea Party years in the 2000 from the 2009 period all the way up to the modern day, spouting eliminationist rhetoric against the left, especially Republicans living in hyper rural backwoods ruby red districts. These people these people ran on the idea of using Second Amendment remedies against us if they didn't win the 2010 and 2014 midterm elections. Donald Trump himself ran on the idea that, or at least he ran while using eliminationist rhetoric against his opponents in the 2016 presidential election. Hell, the guy went so far as to say that if he couldn't get the court appointments he wanted, that the Second Amendment crowd could do something about it. He said that. Are people really surprised that folks who were elected while running on, or who voted for people who ran on the idea of using the rest of us for target practice, acquitted Donald Trump? People need to understand the far right, not just the far right, but the American right in general, have been pushing eliminationist rhetoric since the 1920s, since the days when they used to push the whole America First slogan. This is there were all kinds of groups back in the 1930s dedicated to the idea of just imposing their will on America. The American Liberty League, the Silver Legions of America under William Dudley Pelley and Henry Lamont Beach, the Brown Khakis, the America First Committee, all these different groups, all these far right, proto fascist and fascist organizations, the Northern Manufacturers Alliance, under Robert Welsh, the guy who eventually went on to found the John Birch Society in the post World War II era. They've been doing this since the 1930s, since the 1920s at least. Hell, Alvin Olson, the leader of the American Legionnaires, invited Mussolini to be the keynote speaker all the way up into 1932. The keynote speaker at their annual convention all the way up to 1932. This is a guy who basically said that he wanted to turn America into Mussolini's Italy These people, they've been pushing this shit for 5 generations. Why is anyone surprised that Donald Trump that Donald Trump got acquitted? Why is anyone surprised? This is not the alt-right is not something new. The Tea Party was not something new. All these different groups are nothing new. The right has always been like this. Hell, Robert Welsh, Strickland Connor, Frederick Koch, all these people who were the co-founders of the John Birch Society, Henry Lamont Beach when he founded who was the second in command of the Silver Legions of America, who went on to found the American Eagle Forum and co-developed the identity theology with Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard William Potter Gale. These people have been pushing this shit since their great grandparents were still alive. Since their great grandparents were in their 30s. You think? Are you surprised that they let Donald Trump off the hook? This has always been the dominant stream in the American right. This has always been the way they are. And William F. Buckley Jr., hell, that fucker, all these people who were either involved in the John Birch Society or were involved in the formation of conservative academia, the Organization of Conservative Media and Academia in the 1950s, were big supporters of the Spanish nationalists under Francisco Franco. And to those who say that Francisco Franco was not a fascist, hey, the fucker formed an alliance with the Third Reich in the Spanish Civil War, and they killed like 500,000 people in Spain. This is in the early 1930s. These people, they haven't changed since then. What you see on the alt-right was nothing special. That was nothing out of the ordinary. The religious right developed from the Southern homeschooling movement, started by Southern white parents who wanted to use homeschooling and charter schools as a legal out to get around desegregation in public schools. It's why 80% of all white kids in Montgomery, here in my home state of Alabama, go to charter schools today because they use that as a legal. These people have never changed. They never will change. You can't change people like this. It's why so many of these young far-right people, these young conservative types, it's why so many of these younger white millennials and younger white Gen Z folks fall into this shit, is because their parents raised them to be this way. Their parents practically do everything they can to limit their access to other forms of information outside of their own political subculture. They do everything they can to create positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement to keep these people within the fold. And too many of these young white people are too scared that they're going to lose their family's social safety net if they try to rebel against this kind of stuff, so they eventually just fall into it and assume that it's normal. I know because I grew up in that environment. Hell, 2 weeks ago, I went to visit my relatives in Clay County, just to see where the hell my old man was buried, so I could piss on his clucker ass one good time. And yeah, there's a story there, and you've already heard it before. I bet you I heard the N-word with hard R's about 400 times in less than 2 hours amongst all of them. There were Trump flags flying everywhere. These people, they haven't changed since the 1950s. They haven't changed since the 1920s. They will hold on to this shit forever, okay? When Lyndon Johnson, there's a reason why they fucking hate Democrats. There's a reason why they fucking hate people of color. There's a reason why they hate the left. When they've issued a cultural fatwa. They've had a cultural, the cultural political equivalent of a fatwa against liberals ever since the day that Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act, and for some of them, since the day that Harry Truman integrated the military. Do not listen to these people when they say that they're not racist. They are fucking racist as hell. I'm telling you this because I grew up around here. One of my favorite games I like to play is I like to criticize Biden from the left, and then Trump supporters will jump in, Tea Partiers and all these people will jump in, and they'll start criticizing him with me, but they'll do it from the right without realizing I'm doing it from the left, and then I'll spring it on them that they just agreed with a socialist on every point that I made, and it pisses them off so bad because a lot of these people, they try to hide it in plain sight. They try to hide that shit. But if you're a white guy, if you're a Southern white dude, and you criticize a Democratic Party figure that they know that they've been trained to fucking hate with an irrational passion, these they can't help. They can't keep it in their pants. They'll let their real feelings out around other white people, around other white dudes. If you have a Southern accent, if you have a nice little yokel twang to you, you know, that whole salt of the earth twang. They'll let it out because they think they're part of the good old boy crowd. That you're part of the good old boy crowd, and they feel comfortable and everything. Then you spring it on them. Oh shit! You have no idea how much these fuckers lose their mind when you spring that fuck. Just when you play them like that. And you get them to agree with a left wing argument because they don't really understand the arguments that they're making so much as they're just repeating what they've heard from either Fox Business, Fox News, Newsmax, Sinclair Broadcasting, Breitbart.com, or the myriad of other right wing hardline rags and clarion horns that are out there. It pisses them off. Because you expose just how fucking stupid these people really are. You expose just how driven by just hate for the other that these people truly are. Now, yes, it's true that there is some economic anxiety amongst this crowd. Because again, Trump in 2016, about 10% of Barack Obama's voters turned around and voted for Trump. So there is that whole failure of democratic centrism element there. It is a big part of why the far right has been so successful in gaining power in this country and holding on to it, despite their absurdities, despite the conspiratorial nonsense, despite the public health risk they've created, the very real public health crisis they've created around the pandemic, around all the anti-science stuff they've peddled since the fucking 70s. But you have to understand that race has always been the core of this. In 2016, Donald Trump got 65% of white male baby boomer voters. They were the single largest group that voted for Donald Trump, that went to Donald Trump above anyone else. And when you think about it, when 2030 comes around, they say that by 2030, the majority of all these boomers are going to be gone. They're going to be dead. And Gen X, I know a lot of older white, a lot of white boomers who with gray and white hair on the upper end of that, on the upper end of the age scale of Generation X, who have a mindset very similar to their boomer counterparts. But the thing about about Gen X is that Gen X, they're so small. There are only like 40 million of them. They're the smallest generation in terms of numbers. There aren't enough of them to actually help the GOP provide a buffer against us. And if you look at the insurrection, the people who were involved in the insurrection, most of them were the folks who were just wealthy enough that they could afford an airplane ticket. These weren't working class folks. Only, I think a study was done. I saw a study somewhere that showed that like 8 or 9% of the people involved in the insurrection were working class folks. That's it. This was not a working class uprising. This was an uprising of the relatively well off, that is, people who weren't exactly oligarchs but were on the cusp of being it. You know, they had just enough money that they were probably their local town tyrant. The insurance salesman, the car dealership owner guy, these kinds of people. Those are the sorts of folks that you see involved in this kind of right-wing violence, involved in these upper middle-class suburban Republican types. Now, I'm not saying that you should let these rednecks, these social conservative blue collar types off the hook or anything, but there are a lot of upper middle class white assholes who are just one generation removed from white trash. The sort who the sort who are well off enough that they are their own feudal lord in their area of the country. You know, in whatever locale they are that they live in, they are the top dog, or at least one of them. These are the kinds of people who are your local tyrants that your politicians in your cities go to for money. These are the sorts of people who go into your restaurants and treat your waiters like they treat the waiters and service workers and retail employees like crap. These are the Daryls and Karens of the world. These people are just they're assholes who treat their own employees like absolute garbage. They're greedy motherfuckers who are essentially aspiring oligarchs in their own right. And these people make up the major electoral buffer, the primary electoral buffer of the Republican Party and the far right. People need to understand that it's not the working class white guys, blue collar white guys, that are most likely to get involved in this kind of shit. Because most of them are working 50, 60, 70 hours a week in these factories around where I live. You know, out here in the sticks, it's like they're having to work 80 hours a week in some rinky-dink factory, making like $7.50 an hour. That right there is your typical working class blue collar type who happens to be a redneck. He doesn't have time to be involved in all this stuff. He doesn't have the money to pay for these massive arsenals of weapons. Now again, I'm not giving these people a free pass because they were raised to have many of the same prejudices as these upper middle class white dudes who wrap themselves in the whole Duck Dynasty blue collar social conservative white man aesthetic, but white redneck aesthetic. But we have to understand that these people, the people who supported Donald Trump, by and large, a smaller number of them were working class than not. It's just people need to get to their heads that it's the people with the money. It's still the people with the money overall who are calling the shots on the far right, who are calling the shots in the Republican Party. These are the people who are most prone to being attracted to this kind of violent rhetoric, because they know that they're in an economic, cultural, religious, and social and ethnic position in our country, in our society, where the consequences for them will be mild, and they take advantage of this shit. I've been at the other end of these people. They're horrible human beings. They're greedy down to a T. Their masculinity, they have a very bad masculinity crisis for the most part that they try to compensate for with their money. They treat people that they see as lesser than them like human garbage. These are probably the single worst element in our country, but they're also the ones that are the closest to actually making it economically into the next step on the socioeconomic ladder. These are the kinds of people who buy into the whole idea that, oh, there's always going to be a bigger fish, as some sort of shitty defense, like, oh, there needs to be a pecking order, as some kind of justification for why we have a hierarchical society in this country to begin with. These are the sorts of people who need people to look down on, who need people to put their jackboots on. These are the sorts of people that Donald Trump appeals to. And I guess the one bit of solace we can take is that when the 65% of white boomers that voted for this asshole in 2016, when they die, they're taking a good bit of the mass support for the Republican Party with them. Could be as much as maybe a fourth, maybe as high as half the Republican Party's primary support. Because Gen X, they're not big enough. They're not big enough to be a problem. The older white men that buy into the right wing bullshit out of Gen X, there just aren't enough of them. It's going to be hard for them to win elections with them. And yeah, I know that I shouldn't. I know that sounds very ageist, and yes, and it is in many ways, but I don't really I'm of the opinion that these people, they talk a lot of shit about millennials. They talk a lot of shit about Gen Z. They talk a lot of shit about people who are younger than them, saying, "Oh, you guys are hopeless. You guys are hopeless." But these folks, I'm just saying that I've given up on them as much as they've given up on us. They're a lost cause. I really don't give a shit what happens to them anymore. They voted for this. They're sticking with this, and all these QAnon types who bought into this shit, most of them wound up buying into this because they were primed to buy into it from birth. And when things didn't go their way, when they I'm trying to think here. When voting for Donald Trump didn't turn out the way they thought it would, the fuckers, instead of coming to a different conclusion and saying, hey, maybe this right wing politics thing didn't work, they fell back on the same propaganda that they were raised by their shitty parents. They fell back on their default setting from their upbringing, and that was to fall back on just being far right and staying right wing, staying conservative, and all that shit. They didn't come to the conclusion that conservatism is a load of shit. They just came to a different conclusion that there was some kind of other reason for why things weren't turning. Oh, it has to be the deep state. It has to be some other group. It has to be it has to be some pedophile ring in a pizzeria or whatever. It just all this shit that when they will essentially come to any other conclusion than the left being right, because it goes against all their programming. It goes against everything their parents basically beat them into with a fucking belt when they were coming up. This is why I don't give conservatives the benefit of the doubt. This is why I don't respect conservative agency. I can't. They didn't choose to be conservatives. They just fall back on it as their default because they were raised to be that way. They never chose to walk away from anything. They just stuck with... This is why whenever I hear a conservative claim to be a free, independent, critical thinker, I laugh. I fucking laugh at them. I laugh at them. I laugh in their face. It pisses them off, but they need to be given that treatment. They need it because it's the only way they'll learn. Well, actually, they won't learn, but you're really not helping them by treating them with respect, because they don't learn from that. They just see that as weakness. They exploit it. They take it and they try to normalize their bullshit further if you try to give them an inch. And then if you don't respect them, despite them being pieces of shit, what do? They start hollering about how they're being oppressed. Well, I'm being canceled. Oh, I'm being oppressed because I'm being contradicted. I'm being oppressed because I have to live with consequences. Wah, wah. I'm gonna take up my gun and go on a shooting rampage because some girl friend zoned me. Wah, wah. I gotta pay taxes like everyone else. Wah, wah. I'm better than that. I'm a free thinker because Rush Limbaugh and Breitbart.com told me. I'm a free thinker because Ben Shapiro told me. This is... But going back to the original point of the video, this is... I'm not surprised. Nobody should be surprised that Donald Trump was acquitted. We all saw it coming. Because almost every Republican who voted to acquit him either were elected on the kind of eliminationist rhetoric that the right wing has been pushing for the past 5 fucking generations, or they themselves believe that kind of rhetoric, and they hold no value for the lives of their colleagues, just because their colleagues have came into a different opinion from them, came to have a different socio-political opinion from theirs. The only hope we really have now is to just wait them out. Wait for enough conservatives to die of old age so that all these young right-wing white millennials who are raised to be right-wing by their parents are politically isolated enough that they can't act on their bullshit. Urbanization, demographics changes, and old age attrition are the three factors that are going to doom the Republican Party. And yes, it's going to take a while before this happens, and there's a good chance Donald Trump will never see consequences. Assuming, of course, New York State and Georgia State don't get their act together. Which, New York State, they're now that Donald Trump no longer has presidential privilege, he could face some actual consequences that federal judges, including those appointed by him, can't get him out of. But then again, those federal judges that he appointed don't really seem like they're that keen to help him out now that they got what they want, as evidenced by the 60 out of 61 cases that he's lost over the whole voting fraud bullshit that he's been pushing prior to the insurrection. So really, the only hope we have now is to just wait his supporters out. Just wait out his right wing base and hope that enough of them die of old age, or enough of them come around. I mean, there are a lot of folks who are now leaving the Republican Party. Donald Trump's opposition within the GOP are actually meeting and pushing for the creation of a new center right party, and just letting the far right have the GOP. We may be looking at a situation in the future where, because Donald Trump was acquitted, the Republican Party might fracture into smaller parties. Donald Trump's base are talking about forming their own Patriot Party. I've often said that we need a left-wing third party, but I'm also not blind to the fact that the Republican Party breaking apart might be the only thing that actually keeps them out of power in enough parts of the country that we don't have to worry about a long-term Pinochet type character rising to power. Because it's important that we all understand that Donald Trump may no longer be president, but somewhere out there is a Donald Trump character, someone much more intelligent than Donald Trump, who has the same proclivities as that piece of shit, who is waiting in the shadows, moving up the ranks of the GOP, moving up the ranks of the right wing, and getting ready to run his own campaign. And it's that motherfucker out there, whoever he may be, that I'm more worried about now. The one that you can't see. And now that they know that there are no consequences for this kind of thing, for what happened on January 6th, at least for those who instigate it, if they happen to be in a position of power. I know the participants have been arrested left and right, but Donald Trump, he's probably going to get off scot-free. But we need to understand that the Republican Party in the Senate, they have officially made it known to us that what happened on January 6th was a training exercise. Eventually, these motherfuckers will get lucky. And somehow we've got to survive until enough of them die out, until enough of the old guard of the Republican Party, until enough white boomers that voted for Trump have passed into the ether. That's our only hope now, to dig our heels in, buy time, as much time as we can, until old age attrition takes its toll on their ranks. All right, this is Socialism on Roids. Peace out, everybody.